What would it be like to be a super entrepreneur? And I would like to add there's absolutely no hyperbole within that label. You see, my guest today has lived the dream that a lot of entrepreneurs have, which is coming up with an idea for a business and then growing it to the point where it becomes the dominant force within its industry. And that's exactly what Liz Elting did. She was the co-founder and CEO of a company called TransPerfect, a language services provider. And basically, her and her partner founded this company way back when in a dorm room and then grew it to the point where it became the largest of its kind in the world, with revenues over $1.1 billion and offices in almost every city around the world. And also, to give you context, when she sold her shares in 2018, she sold for about $440 million. Yeah. So anyway, this conversation, if you have any inkling or any interest towards entrepreneurship, you are going to want to lean in and listen a little bit more carefully than what you might normally do. There's just tons of insights from start to finish. Beyond that, I mean, as I always say, these highlight video compilations, they only represent portions of the conversation that I had. The full-length audio version, about 50 minutes, can be found wherever you access your podcasts. Just do that search for Life as a ... All right, well, I think it's about time to jump right into it, so why don't we? I were to ask you what the role of an entrepreneur is, a lot of people might say it's coming up with new and innovative ideas. And to be honest, that can scare a lot of people off. But this clip represents something a little bit different, and it's a really important distinction that Liz makes, and to be honest, I think kind of opens things up for a lot of people. It might shift your mindset towards entrepreneurship. So check this out.
One of the things I like to say is, don't confuse being an entrepreneur with being an inventor. You do not need to invent something entirely new to be wildly successful. And clearly, I didn't. In fact, instead, it was that I had experience in an industry, which I loved because it related to my passion. And I really had intense knowledge of that industry after 3 action-packed long years there, both in sales and production. And I saw a gap between what was needed and what was available in the industry. So when we started the company, there were 10,000 other translation companies out there at the time.
Yeah.
Crazy, right? And
Yeah.
so I almost chose not to do it as a result, because I thought, well, I just had been working at one. Then there were a whole bunch of others that were tiny. It was, very fragmented industry. And then I also knew of other people who were starting translation companies. So I thought, I got to do something different. But what I talk about in my book is I had a very brief stint in finance, realized it was not for me.
Yeah.
And I thought, if I am going to start a translation company, I want it to be the biggest and the best. So we're going to do it differently and better. So the point comes back to what we're saying. You don't need to do something entirely new. You just need to do it differently and better. And the other piece of it is, I think you're continually innovating, whether you're a serial entrepreneur, where clearly you're coming up with new ideas and starting new businesses, or in my case, within our business, we had to keep pivoting and transitioning and changing with the times and coming up with new ideas based on what we felt our clients needed. So constant innovation is such a key part of being an entrepreneur and a business person, but certainly an entrepreneur.
Now, in having a caliber of guests like Liz on the program, I really want to dive into the mindset of what it takes to really succeed, to take an idea and go all the way with it. Like, what separates somebody like herself from a lot of other people that don't ever achieve those heights? And this is what Liz had to say about that.
What differentiates wildly successful people and average people is simply discipline. And I think that's the point here. It's about going in. And one of the things I like to say is say it, set it, do it. Meaning, say what your overall goal was. And in my case, it was to create the world's largest translation company. And, part of why I was in a position where we could do that is I wasn't a translator. I didn't have that high level of language knowledge and technical expertise that translators tend to have. So I needed to focus on what I could do. And I was a business person. So I figured we would get the talent and then be pioneers in the industry and add the business perspective on it. But what that was saying, okay, we're going to create the largest. And what does that mean? What is our revenue goal, our overall
Yeah.
revenue goal, and then our annual revenue goal, and then monthly and daily, and then the actions that it took every day to make those numbers. And those
Yeah.
actions were, in our case, and I talk about this in the book, 300 letters a day, 300 phone calls a day. And now, as I say, it might be 300 emails a day or 300 LinkedIn connections, whatever it is. But the point
Yeah.
is coming up with the numbers to get you there and then making yourself do them every day and being tough on yourself, making yourself write 50 emails and send them out before you go on your coffee break. And
Yeah.
then, another 100 before you go to lunch and so on. And doing that with every day also as far as time, be intense. So for whatever your hours are, work intensely during that time. Don't get distracted and
Hmm.
be tough on yourself. And the early days can be very grim. It's a lot of hard
Yeah.
work. And I think that's what you were talking about. And, one of the things I like to say, and I think it's what I tried to do, was work today like no one else will, so you can live and give tomorrow like no one else can.
Yeah, I really like that last clip there. And part of the reason I do is I think there's power within it. The lazy assumption that a lot of us make at times is that people such as Liz reach such heights based off of talent alone. Now, certainly that plays a big part of it, but there's also this other side of just discipline, adherence to goals and perseverance and execution. And that plays just as big of a role as the talent. So I do have one more clip on goal setting that you might want to pull out that notepad and jot a few things down.
One other thing that you spoke about already was this notion of goal setting, and I think this is a really critical one, and I want to return to this point and really emphasize it for listeners. We spoke about passion; that's certainly an important element to growing a business. But again, goal setting, and you have this approach that you really adhere to, one that's out there. A lot of people know about this already, but it's called SMART. You could break that down for us really quickly.
Sure. So SMART is the acronym for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. So I guess, with every goal, it just involves making sure it's a very specific goal. Like, for example, what we did, an example of something we did was, I thought, okay, if we're going to be entrepreneurs and build the largest company, we need to act as though we have a boss and we're going to open 100 offices. So we're going to do for a year, every year for the next however many years it was. I mean, we ended up doing them a little faster after a period of time. But in the initial couple years, basically we would say, okay, one per quarter. And I remember literally putting down on paper, okay, first quarter, San Francisco, second quarter, Atlanta, third quarter, Washington, D.C., fourth quarter, Chicago, and so on. So
Yeah.
very specific. And that's obviously very measurable, because you either open it or you don't. And by opening it, what we meant was hiring a person and putting them in an executive suite. That's what we did back then. I suppose now they're likely to be working remotely because it's just a one-person sales office initially. Then, so specific, measurable, achievable. Certainly it was achievable. And partly why something like that would be is it was just the cost of one person. It wasn't spending a lot of money that we didn't have on some large office. Relevant. It was relevant to accomplishing our overall goal of becoming the world's largest translations company with an office in every major city around the world. And then time bound. Of course, it was time bound. It had to happen
Mhm.
each quarter. So again, SMART meaning specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time bound. That's an example, but doing that with so many different things throughout the
Yeah.
course of the business, I think is key to achieving your overall goal.
Now, as you can well imagine, having success within entrepreneurship comes down to several different things, but one of them is definitely all about seizing opportunities. And here's a great clip of Liz explaining one such example during her journey and one that really set her and her company up.
part of how we got Goldman Sachs as our first big financial client. That was a client that, of course, we wanted, and they called us up, and it was a couple days before Christmas, and they said, okay, we have all this work that needs to be done in our office, and, can you come in now or tomorrow? I think it was tomorrow, which was, Christmas Eve, and just stay until it's done. And not too many people want to do that, right? On December
Right.
24th for a few days
Yeah.
until it's done. And, we had plans with my family, but we ended up just saying, okay, Goldman Sachs is calling, we're going. And showing up when no one else will is critical. And then after that, we were able to have Goldman Sachs as a multi-million-dollar client. But had we not done that, had we not shown up when others wouldn't, that we never would have been able to make that happen. And I think that's just a really important lesson, because if you say, well, I work, if you have too many rules at the beginning, you're not going to build those loyal clients.
Yeah.
And in the early days, you need those loyal clients. And they may start with a small project. That happened to us on a number of our biggest clients. They started with a 1 or 2 page project. We did it, and we gave it everything we had, and it was a test. And from that developed into multiple projects, and that developed into multi-million-dollar relationships. So I think that's a super important lesson, to spoil the client with quality and service, and make sure you will do what others won't do. Because, when there are thousands of companies doing what you're doing, you have to offer something different. But then they become loyal clients, they become raving fans, and then you get repeat business and referrals from them for life. And that's how you grow the company exponentially.
Okay, well, next up is a clip of Liz explaining another essential element of being a strong entrepreneur. And it's this notion of reflection. As a leader, your company is going to grow, and it's going to shift, and it's going to change, and so are its needs. And you've got to be willing to adapt. And this clip perfectly illustrates this point. So listen in.
When I started the company, the idea was to differentiate ourselves by spoiling the client with service and quality. And we did. And I think we did as good a job of that as anyone in the industry. We certainly tried. But then, of course, what I learned was you really have to spoil the employees. And you set things up right. And then they will spoil the client with service and quality, and the rest will take care of itself, the revenue and the profit. So and I guess that's how it works. Because when you're a startup entrepreneur, you're dealing with all the clients, so you're spoiling them. Then you start adding people. Your people are dealing with the clients, and then you need to spoil those employees.
I do want to squeeze in one more clip and end this thing on a high. And this clip is Liz explaining why it's such a great time to be an entrepreneur. So listen in.
I think it's a wonderful time for people to be entrepreneurs. It's with the internet, it's so easy to get started as far as, all the kind of free marketing you can do on social media, getting a website up quickly for a moderate amount of money. And then, and being able to work from home, not having to pay for the overhead of an office. I mean, there are a lot of reasons. It's a great time to do it. And and then you can create your own rules, and you can create your own culture, and you can be, one of the things I like to say is, you might do a lot better than you would at someone else's company. And economic power is social power, and social power is political power. And that's how we change the world.
I think this might be the point to draw things to a close. But as noted, there's just so much more contained within the audio version. Right from start to finish, Liz is delivering the goods. And beyond that, if you're still interested, you can go check out her book, Dream Big and Win. You're gonna love that as well. And finally, one more request. I gotta squeeze it in here too. I would appreciate that like or subscribe. Anyhow, I will have another video coming for you right next week, so don't miss it. All right, until then, we'll see ya.